If you don't recognize this soundtrack, I feel bad for you, because that means you missed out on one of Rockstar's greatest games, Bully. Now in 2006, when Bully was first released, Rockstar was on fire, coming out with multiple bangers every year with games like Midnight Club, Warriors, and Manhunt, sandwiching Bully, making it go under the radar. Like, the game sold about 1.5 million copies at launch, and in Rockstar's eyes, that was a dud compared to other games that came out around the same time. For comparison, San Andreas sold about 27 million copies, and GTA 4 sold about 25 million copies, respectfully. But they always say numbers don't tell the full story, because even with the low sales numbers of Bully, the game has a large cult following, with the game 16 years later still having a poppin' subreddit. So that brings up the question, why hasn't there been a Bully sequel when the community has been so vocal about wanting another game? And also, how good was Bully actually?
Get off me, man! Soon this school will be ours.
I don't want the school.
Yeah, well I do, pal, and I intend to get it.
Yeah, check. And before we get into it, if somehow you haven't got the chance to play Bully and you don't want the story and every twist that happens to be spoiled, then this might not be the video for you. So let's talk about what Bully actually is. Let's start with the name, because if you're from the US, you know it as Bully, but almost anywhere else it's called Canis Canem Edit, which translates to dog eat dog. And it was originally released in 2006, but it was re-released and updated as Bully Scholarship Edition, which was absolute garbage. It did way more bad than good. The Scholarship Edition added things such as new clothing options, classes, missions, and characters, and in my opinion it could have done without it all. The only good thing about the Scholarship Edition is the graphical improvements, but they sold on everything else. Let's start with how buggy it is, especially on PC. It's basically unplayable unless you have a fan created patch, which is crazy. Then there's the new classes and clothing. All the new clothing is hella corny and tied to the new classes, which are music class, biology, geography, and math. Like, yeah, give us more of the least enjoyable part of the game. And oh my god, the missions are all cringy and boring, except for maybe the one where you beat up Santa and his elves. And yes, you heard me right, fight Santa and his elves. And guess who you do the mission for? Santa. Let me just give you some advice. If you want to play this game in 2022, please play the original on a PS2 emulator like PCSX2. Now that I've ranted about how horrible the Scholarship Edition version is, let's talk about how the game has its reputation of being GTA for kids, or GTA in a school. Even though the mission structures are similar to each other, when I hear GTA in a school, I think more of a school shooter simulator than what Bully actually is, or what it portrays. Because even with the title Bully, the main character Jimmy is fighting against the bullies at the school in order to make Bullworth a better place. And since I brought him up, let's talk about the main character, Jimmy Hopkins. A troubled teen who was involuntarily enrolled into Bullworth Academy in the fictional New England town of Bullworth by his mother, who is leaving the country on a cruise for her honeymoon with her new husband. But this is a quick summary of how the game goes. Jimmy comes to the school as an outcast with no friends, where the large majority of the school are in a clique. But Jimmy just wants to coast through without any problems. But almost immediately conflict arises with almost everyone he meets. Nobody knows at the time that Jimmy has hands that are E for everyone. And throughout the game, your objective is to win over every single clique's respect, one by one, doing missions and side quests until you rule the school yourself. Bully has 7 different cliques that you encounter during the game, and no one group is bigger than the other, which in my opinion was a missed opportunity to have the size of a clique come into play. Like, maybe one group is trying to take over the school entirely, and 2 arch enemies have to team up to take down the powerhouse or something like that. Anyways, every clique is very stereotypical and over the top, so it's easy to distinguish them and assume how all of them are going to act, even who they have the most problems with. On top of that, each group has its own leader that acts as a final boss when you eventually have to fight them to earn their respect. But let's go over the different cliques. Firstly, we have the non-affiliated regular students that just wear the regular school uniform. Next, we have the nerds, who are led by Ernest Jones, and
Their turf is the library.
And they might look harmless.
They're actually sneaky bastards.
You can tell you're dealing with a nerd when you see the light green school uniform and they almost all wear glasses. They're the weakest group in the game, and they can all jump you at the same time and you can still easily come out on top. But to compensate for their weak attacks and frail builds, they have the best weapons in the game, like spud cannons, bottle rockets, and stink bombs. And they beef mainly with the bullies and the jocks. Then we have the bullies, whose leader is Russell Northrup, the biggest and debatably the hardest person to fight one-on-one in hand-to-hand combat. You can find them almost anywhere on campus. They're really easy to spot because you always see their white polos messing with anyone weaker than them, including kids and even girls. Bullies usually fight by brawling and low blows, and when it gets really tough for them, they also like to use baseball bats and slingshots. Bullies beef the most with the nerds, and that's about it. Then there's the greasers, led by Johnny Vincent, who is raised by his love for his girlfriend Lola, who is known as the school hoe, cheating on him. She gets Johnny and the greasers in a lot of unnecessary trouble just by her hoe tendencies. You can spot a greaser just by the fact that they look like they're stuck in the 50s, wearing their leather jackets with slick back greasy hair, and they mostly chill by the auto shop and the parking lot. When they fight, they also like to use a brawling style with more of a Greco-Roman wrestling season to it. And when times are tough, they like to use slingshots and firecrackers. The greasers mostly just beef with the preps. Next is the preps that I just mentioned, who are led by Darby Harrington. All the preps are rich and stuck up and they only care about themselves. The preps are some of the hardest NPCs to fight in the game, especially if it's just hand-to-hand combat. Because they all train in boxing, it's hard to land a charged up punch because they will weave it and hit you with a counter punch. Now to spot a prep, you can mostly find them at the Harrington house where they wear their aquaberry sweaters. Now the prep's biggest enemies are the greasers, which is probably the most heated beef in the game. But the preps really aren't liked by anyone because of their snobby ways. The jocks are the next up with their leader Ted Thompson, who are all about toxic masculinity and no brains. And if you get caught around the gym and the football field where the jocks call their turf, they will almost immediately start chasing you. And you better finish them off quick or get to stepping, because they are the hardest NPCs to fight in the game if you're outmanned, because of their high health and high power. Especially if you run into Damon West, because he and Russell are pretty much tied for the hardest people to fight in the game one-on-one. So just imagine him with all his boys. Jocks are very easy to spot because they almost all walk around in their Letterman jackets. Also, they have the most beef, of course, with the nerds. Then last but not least, there's the townies, led by Edgar Munson, who are never actually seen on campus. They are spotted mostly in blue skies around the trailer parks in orange, and they are a lot older than most of the students at Bullworth. A lot of them are actually dropouts from the school at Bullworth, and they have a very distinct and weird fighting style. And it almost looks like they play a little too much Street Fighter and Tekken in the past and just imitated all the moves. They hate almost everyone who goes to Bullworth because they see them as entitled brats. So it's clear why they have the least respect for Jimmy at the beginning of the game. Along with all the cliques in the game, the other characters such as Gary the sociopath and Petey the only loyal friend Jimmy has throughout the whole game. Then there's the prefects, who are somewhat like security guards and hall monitors mixed into one. Then there's faculty such as Edna the nasty lunch lady who goes out of her way to spit in the food to add flavor to it. Another is the English teacher Mr. Galloway, who enjoys scotch just a little too much to the point where he keeps multiple bottles in his desk and in various locations around the school campus. Bully is very similar to the Rockstar formula and mission structure we all know and love. Meet this person at the marker on the floor, do some favors for them, and you improve your reputation. And like many Rockstar titles, Bully is an open world sandbox where you either choose to do missions or just explore the town and do whatever you want. But you must play through the story to unlock every section of the map. For example, the first chapter is completely played in the campus grounds. And after you complete the chapter, you unlock the outside town with some restrictions, until you eventually unlock the ability to explore the whole area progressing through the story. And you progress doing missions, side missions, errands, and jobs around the town. Also, since you're at a school, you do have classes every day that you choose to either skip or attend. But it's better to do them to get them out the way and avoid truancy, along with the fact that completing classes give you specific perks like adding firecrackers to your inventory from your chemistry set, getting the unspoken Riz ability from art class, or unlocking bikes from shop class. And in Bully, truancy is one of the lower infractions in the game. Unlike the GTA games where they have a star winner level, Bully just has a trouble meter that goes up based on how bad the things Jimmy does is. For example, something small like violating dress code and not wearing a school uniform only makes your trouble meter go up very slightly and gets you a verbal warning. There's also medium violations like weapon violence that gives you 2 bars to the meter and causes prefect and cops to chase you. and if they get a hold of you, you'll still have the opportunity to spam Y to break their grip on you. Then there's large violations such as attacking a child, girl, prefect, or any other adult, giving you 3 trouble bars, maxing it out and making it blink red instead of the usual yellow. But speaking of putting paws on someone, how does the combat in the game work? For most of the game, majority of the combat is just hand to hand, where you spam the square button. With some variations you can unlock in gym class, where the creepiest teacher in the school, Mr. Burton, teaches you some wrestling moves along with some not wrestling moves. Then you can also learn new moves from the homeless war vet who lives on campus. You just have to bring him transistors so he can eventually do this. Along with hand-to-hand combat, there's also different weapons in the game like slingshots, firecrackers, spud cannons, itching powder, and a lot more. But at some point, the combat starts to become very repetitive when you figure out what weapons and combos work the best. Then brings the question, how do you get around in this open world? You can choose to just run around, which isn't the best form of transportation seeing as it's the slowest. You pretty early on unlock the skateboard, which gets added to your inventory, and this really helps a lot getting around the map faster. And you can also do some tricks.
Let's go home! Let's go home, ladies and gentlemen! Let's go home!
Hey, I said some tricks, this ain't Tony Hawk. Anyways, then there's bikes, which are my favorite way of getting around. But some people like the go-kart more, but you have to unlock that from completing the go-kart races, which I didn't do because I kinda rushed through and just played the main story mostly. So now we talked about how you get around the map, let's actually talk about the setting of the game. Of course, we are in the small fictional New England town of Bullworth, where we have the school Bullworth Academy, which has 9 buildings including the main building, dorm rooms, library, gym, and the clique hangouts like the Harrington House and the Chop Shop. The first area unlocked in the game is Old Bullworth Vale, where you do the preps missions in Chapter 2. It's the rich area of town with large houses, the city park, the beach, and also the carnival. In Chapter 2 you also unlock Bullworth Town, which is the area with the town center, a fire station, a movie theater, and a motel. Then in Chapter 3 you unlock the area New Coventry, which is the more run-down part of town, with low-income housing and a bike park. And the last area you unlock is Blue Skies, which is the industrial part of town with factories, trailer parks, and the mental asylum called Happy Volts. And in this game, unlike a lot of other Rockstar titles, every chapter in the game brings a new season, which makes the environment feel fresh. Now let's talk about the soundtrack a little before we get on to the quick summary of the game. If you haven't played this game before and you missed out on the game's OST, you missed out on some fire. I never really noticed how much a soundtrack could add to a game until I played this in Minecraft. It's always so upbeat and funky to the point that even the tensest moments seem happy. Now let's get into a quick summary of what happens in the story of Bully. So at the start of the game, Jimmy is being dropped off at the academy by his mom and stepdad while they go on their honeymoon. As soon as they drop him off, he is saddened by the thought of his mom choosing her husband over him. But before he can think on it too much, Mrs. Danvers interrupts and introduces him to the school, and she is the first person that Jimmy meets in the new town. From there, Jimmy meets with the principal, Dr. Crabblesnitch, for a stern talking to about how he's not gonna put up with any of Jimmy's behavior he got away with at other schools. After their meeting, Miss Danvers instructs Jimmy to get changed into his uniform. And right after the talk with Crabblesnitch, Jimmy immediately gets into a confrontation with the bully clique, who are blocking his way to the boys' dorm. But the bullies didn't know that Jimmy was really him. So one of them chose a fight with Jimmy and gets absolutely clapped. But that really pisses off their leader Russell, who runs up on Jimmy and hits him with the meanest overhand I've ever seen in my life. To be honest, I'm surprised that nigga Jimmy ate that shit like that, like goddamn. Anyways, Jimmy eventually goes into the dorm where he meets Gary, who seems to be waiting for Jimmy's arrival. He is Jimmy's first friend he meets in the game, and he tries to help Jimmy out and tell him a little about the school. But I decided to whip his ass and failed the mission because of it. Anyways, after finally changing into your uniform, you meet Pete, and him and Gary have a little chat before Jimmy gets tired of them and kicks them out. From there, we get a tour of the school from Gary, where you get into more shenanigans from kissing girls to whooping ass as usual. After that, Gary introduces you to all the cliques in the school, until it's time for you to go to your classes. Soon as class is over, you have another meeting with Crabblesnitch where he scolds you about getting into trouble. But whole time there was a bully eavesdropping on the convo and he sees Jimmy as a teacher's pet, so he shoots him with a slingshot, then runs like a bitch. He's actually running back to a setup that the bullies organized for Jimmy. Then they try to jump Jimmy, but of course again it doesn't go good for them, seeing as they all got their ass whooped. And can we take time to talk about how this wall breaks? Like, the fuck? Anyways, after the fight, Jimmy gets the slingshot from the last bully. And somehow Gary knows you got a slingshot and decides you should practice your shot on windows and football players that are trying to practice. Next you have to help Algie the nerd get to the bathroom without getting busted up. From there, Gary decides that you guys should mess with the old guy on campus, but he actually turns out to be more useful than you guys originally thought, because he teaches you new fighting combos for transistors. Now from there, the nerds need help once again, but this time it's Bucky that's in trouble with the bullies. You have to go to the auto shop to save him, but afterwards he rewards you with a skateboard. Time has passed a bit in the school and at this point it's almost Halloween. But in the next mission you use the slingshot again, but this time it's upgraded with a scope. With your upgraded slingshot you protect Ernest from the jocks who are trying to ruin his class president speech. You do a couple more missions until you eventually meet with Gary in the dorm by himself doing this.
There you are.
He tells Jimmy he has a scheme that he needs Jimmy's help with. So Gary takes Jimmy to the parking lot to beat up a few bullies, then weirdly into the basement of the school, which seems like a weird place to talk about a scheme you have to take over the school. But this is actually where the first big turn of the game happens, where Gary shows his true colors and turns on Jimmy. He brings Jimmy into this underground fighting arena where Russell is waiting for Jimmy. Now Russell really isn't the smartest person in the world, so Gary easily manipulates him by telling him Jimmy talked ill on Russell's mom and barnyard animals. This angers Russell very much to the point he wants to fight Jimmy. This brings one of the biggest problems in this game. Bully doesn't have a difficulty setting in the game, which could have made the game even better than it already is. The problem simply is the game is too easy. Like, I know the game is for boppers who can't get GTA, but fuck. Can a nigga get a challenge? For example, Russell up to this point is supposed to be basically untouchable and the baddest man in school. But then in this boss fight, he's more on the side of one of the easier bosses to beat. Like, throughout the game, I never got busted or knocked out even once. Now that might be because I've played the game many times before, but even on my first playthrough, the game didn't challenge me at all. Anyways, after you put that nigga in the dirt, the first chapter ends and you unlock 2 portions of the outside map. The first mission you get is to do some errands for funky ass Edna to get you to explore the town a little bit. After your errands are done, your next mission is to retrieve all the English teacher Mr. Galloway's liquor bottles he stashed around the school and bring them to the art teacher Mrs. Phillips, so that he doesn't get in trouble with the principal. Now starts the preps part of the story. You start by helping out a prep girl named Pinky and then taking her out on a date at the carnival. And from there you see the gym teacher Mr. Burton come out of an adult store very suspiciously, wearing almost a disguise with dirty magazines. Jimmy catches him and he is so caught off guard he can barely get out any words. But once he gets his bearings, he gives Jimmy a fake story about him being in charge of the laundry and he needs Jimmy to sneak into the girls' dorm to secure some panties for him. Very weird and creepy guy Mr. Burton is. And we've all had a creepy gym teacher in our school at one point or another. Anyways, after that, there's a boxing tournament that the preps are having that Jimmy joins, and after you win, you unlock a beach house crib. From there, you meet up with Tad at the gym in a scheme to egg Mr. Hattrick, the math teacher's house, because he keeps snitching on Mr. Galloway's drinking problem. But when you arrive at Tad's house, he pressures you about the gossip he heard from Gary about you talking shit about him and his peoples. It goes tits up and the preps just believe anything Gary says and tries to jump Jimmy. But he eventually escapes from the yard and keeps it pushing. Afterwards, Pete tells Jimmy about a race by the beach, so he rushes over there to race and ends up winning easily. When you go to get your trophy, the preps steal it and run back to the beach house where they again try to jump Jimmy. But this time you get some help from a greaser named Ricky to beat their ass and get your trophy back. Then you do a couple more things to mess with the preps, like egging Tad's house and killing a precious plant in the Harrington house. And to finish off the chapter, you go to the boxing gym to end the beef with the preps. So you challenge their champion Biff to a match to assert your dominance. After you beat him though, the leader Darby still isn't fucking with you, and he sicks the rest of his boys on you. Jimmy makes quick work of them, and then he focuses solely on Darby and defeats him too, making him submit to Jimmy and give him respect. After that, chapter 3 starts, which is the Greasers chapter. With the start of chapter 3 also brings the start of winter, and in the first mission you immediately meet with their leader, Johnny Vincent, who is stressing out over his girl cheating on him with a prep named Gord. So he asks Jimmy to get some proof of her infidelity by taking pictures of the two of them. So he comes up with a plan for you to provoke Gord until he chases you right into an ambush at the bike park. From there you go back to the school where you meet with Ernest, who is worried about Algie, who has been talking to Johnny's girl. So he asks you to make sure Algie is safe and to bring him back to the school. You make your way to Lola's crib in New Coventry, where there's Lola, Algie, and Chad, who are kinda in a love triangle at the moment. But in reality, Lola is just trying to use them both. But when Jimmy pulls up, he warns them that the Greasers are on their way, so they all need to get out of there. Then the Greasers show up right in time for them to make their escape on bikes to get back to the school. This is where the problems with the Greasers start. Anyways, when you get back to the school, it's actually Christmas Day, and your mom sends you some drip. You meet with the preps at the Harrington house, where they tell Jimmy about how the Greasers are pressing Gord and how they want their revenge. So they ask you to go to New Coventry to tag up the place, which pisses off the Greasers even more. Then there's an argument between Lola and Johnny about her hot girl Winter, when Jimmy comes up and interrupts them, which somehow turns into a race for Lola's affection. So of course you beat Johnny even with his boys trying to help him cheat. And after the race, Lola becomes a love interest for you and asks you to break into the abandoned tenement buildings where the Greasers are hanging out to get some of her items that she left there, even her laundry. So you go in through a window and making your way through fighting Greasers along the way, but you eventually find out that a lot of the items are in closed off rooms, which brings up the question, how did the items get there in the first place? Anyways, you go through and come across Johnny's right hand man, Norton, who is wielding a big ass Elden Ring ass hammer. So then the mission becomes clear. You gotta whoop his ass and use the hammer to break down the walls of the enclosed rooms and retrieve all the items, escape, and bring them back to Lola. It's literally so crazy how every problem you have with the Greasers comes back to this girl. I'm just gonna say it, Johnny. Simping ain't pimping, my boy. Swear. Now we finally make it to the last mission of the chapter called The Rumble. And the name holds true because you start talking to Lola about how there's an all-out war going on right now between the preps and the Greasers. So with that info, Jimmy immediately goes on the hunt for answers. Jimmy looks for Peanut to see what's going on, but when he sees Jimmy, he runs away to get back to his boys for backup. They go to a random alleyway and you ask them where Johnny is, but they won't tell you, so you just have to once again whoop a nigga ass real quick. After that, Johnny arrives to confront Jimmy, but the cops interrupt the party and Johnny leaves you with a mean ass right for you to hold on to. Then he runs away like everyone always does for some reason, and you have to chase him down a path which turns out to be a setup. But Petey is there for some reason. I still don't know how, I'm not gonna lie. And he helps you even the odds. Once it's one-on-one, the fight is very easy. But it makes me think, what would have happened if Jimmy lost the fight? Because Johnny lured Jimmy to the middle of nowhere and he wasn't in the right headspace. So that could have been the end of Jimmy right there. But it's okay, because Jimmy got main character energy. But with that, that brings the end of chapter 3. Now with the start of chapter 4 brings the start of spring, and the chapter where the most part of it you go against the jocks. At the start of the chapter, Pete and Jimmy are talking until two jocks come up to try to bully Pete, which upsets Jimmy, who goes to defend Pete and ends up starting problems with the jocks. But to take on the jocks, Jimmy needs some help from the nerds, who for some reason see themselves as above helping Jimmy, even though he's done nothing but help them, which is pretty fucked up if you ask me. Anyways, Jimmy's attitude is kinda like, you're gonna help me or else. And at first the nerds choose or else, but they eventually come around when Jimmy infiltrates their observatory. And at the observatory, Jimmy comes face to face with the nerds leader Ernest again. And he scares him to build a friendship in a sort of the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of relationship. From there, the nerds and Jimmy work together to take down the jocks. The first thing Ernest wants you to do is take dirty pictures of the cheered captain, Mandy, which actually has nothing to do with getting back at the jocks. Ernest just don't get no bitches. Which pisses the jocks off to the point that they organize an all-out assault on the nerds and the observatory for being pervs. So the nerds set up defenses and wait for the assault with the help of Jimmy. But my only question is why the jocks decide to go the long way of getting to the observatory instead of just going the short way. Cause the football field and the observatory are quite literally connected. but I digress. There's a couple more small objectives like helping Mandy by covering up her revealing pictures someone posted around the school and in the town.
Good thing my wife didn't see me looking at that.
What did he say?
Then the next plan the nerds have is for Jimmy to steal the school mascot's uniform to mess with the jocks' big game coming up soon. So you harass the mascot until he eventually chases you into an ambush where you beat him and take the uniform. And from there, it's the day of the big game. And you and the mascot uni and the nerds mess up almost everything about the game before it even happens. And before we get into the game, who were the football team even playing against? Like, where was the other team the whole time? Anyways, it's game time and Jimmy takes off the mask and brings the fight to the jocks on the field. Eventually he breaks Ted's wall of defense with explosive footballs and then sacking him for some reason. With that, you beat the jocks and become the king of the school, and that brings the end to chapter 4. And in the beginning of chapter 5, Jimmy is walking around with all the clique leaders and everything is all cakes and rainbows. There's peace in the school and everybody is friends now. And this part of the game really pisses me off because you spent all this time building up your reputation throughout the game and you finally get to the point you've helped so many people that everyone likes you. And that is taken away almost instantly in the next mission. Because in this mission, the guys gas you up to make your mark and let everyone know you're that guy by spray painting City Hall. So you end up doing it, and as soon as you get back, you talk to Petey, who tells you everything is in shambles because Gary talked to all of the clique leaders and convinced them that you're an asshole. Like, what the fuck, Rockstar? How does everyone get manipulated by Gary and turn on Jimmy when he's been doing nothing but helping all of them for months at this point? Nobody even likes Gary, but they sure do listen to everything he says. Anyways, your respect for every clique goes right back down after you just maxed it out. The only loyal people you have at this point is Petey, Russell, and the bullies. Then shortly after this, you actually meet up with Zoe, a girl who used to go to Bullworth, but she was expelled for complaining about Mr. Burton hitting on her. Which again, Rockstar makes no sense, but I'm gonna let y'all slide this time. So of course she wants her revenge on Mr. Burton, so she comes up with a plan to catch him in a porta potty and send him over a railing, causing this.
Corn for dinner? Oh, this is awful. Yuck! God damn, I stink. I'm gonna have to shower for days with bleach. This is worse than when I got hazed.
After that, it's back to working trying to get some respect back from all the cliques in the school again. Doing tasks like putting fires out at the gym, exterminating reps at the library, breaking Johnny out of the insane asylum, and trying to get the Preppy's boxing trophies back. Then there's some more small objectives building your relationship with Zoe, until you wake up to Miss Danvers calling you to the principal's office. And when you arrive, Crabblesnitch says that he knows it was you that vandalized Town Hall and expelled you right away. And from there starts the final 2-part mission of the game where you meet up with Russell at his house where he stole a police bike to break into the townie's power plant, because all along they were the culprits who were messing with all the cliques and just destroying the school basically. So once you're in the plant, you have to fight your way through the townies to confront Edgar, their leader, on why they're stirring the pot at the school. And when you finally make it to him, you of course get into a fight where you win obviously, and he submits to you and admits he messed with the school because Gary promised they would take over the school together, which was the same thing he told Jimmy. After the fight with Edgar though, you have to help Russell, who is pinned down at the slaughterhouse by the cops. Then after saving him, the two of you meet up with Edgar and his boys at the school. The whole school is upside down with every clique vandalizing the place and setting up shop to go to war. So one by one, you and Russell go from building to building, beating every clique and its leaders till they are all defeated. After that, you go into the main building where you see Edgar and tell him to help calm everybody down. But shortly after, a prefect grabs you and takes your weapons away. But Russell scares them off. Then you hear Gary's voice on the intercom trolling Jimmy until Jimmy chases him up to the roof, literally trying to murder Jimmy in the process. When they finally get to the roof, they have a standoff till they both fall off the roof onto a scaffolding where they fight, which is a very underwhelming final boss fight. Not to mention, I had a weird glitch happen that soft locked my game and made me have to start the whole mission over again from the breaking into the power plant part. Anyways, you beat Gary and fall through the floor into the principal's office where Gary has Crabblesnitch tied up for some reason. Like, I literally don't know what his plan was there. But with that, Gary gets expelled, Mr. Burton gets fired, and the game ends with everybody waiting for Jimmy outside, including Zoe, who runs up to Jimmy and kisses him until the credits roll, and that's the end of the game. So now that I've told you all about the game, the question from the beginning arises again. How good was Bully actually? Well, Bully is a great fucking game, Cuddy. Like I talked a lot of shit about the weird things and the mini plot holes, but it's kinda in a way like you roast the people and the things you care about the most. Cause this game was my childhood. And the good of the game and the legacy it has outweighs the bad tremendously. So if you've never played the game, I highly encourage you to play it for yourself, because there's way too much in the game for me to talk about in one video. Like, I beat the game in 7.5 hours rushing through the story. So if you sit down and enjoy it, it'll be closer to 10 hours doing side missions, errands, and all the other extra content, I would guess. But anyways, y'all, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. And if you did, make sure to hit the like button and also give me a subscribe, cause I'm starving, boy. I can't eat. I'm hungry, boy. I need a. Also, make sure to comment down below what games you want me to do next on the How Good Was It Actually series. It can really be anything from games, childhood toys, movies, TV shows, food, anything you can think of, really. Anyways, yeah, church. I love y'all, man. I'm out. Peace.